Greetings, cows, Gus T Renegade and Justice in for another program to hopefully share constructive information on what racism is, how it works, and what we can do to replace racism with justice. Thank you, everybody, for tuning into the program. We're going to get right to it today. Our guest, this is a guest that was suggested long time ago, way back when it was warm and nice during the summer. One of our loyal listeners suggested that I get this guest on the program. He said he had read our guest's book, The Fence, and he felt that it was very constructive in talking about racism specifically and dealing with addressing how police officers, enforcement officials, practice racism, white supremacy. We've already had one show dealing with that, and definitely felt it was important to do another program addressing it. Our guest today wrote about an incident that happened in Boston, Massachusetts, where some enforcement officials severely mistreated a non-white person who was also an enforcement official, police officer in Boston. So really excited about having him on the program today. He is a professor at Boston University. Our guest for today's program, Professor Dick Lehr. Professor Lehr, are you there?
Yes, I am. How are you?
I'm well, sir. How are you doing?
Good, good. Thank you for having me on your show.
Thank you for being with us. Is it possible you could share a little bit about yourself just so our listeners, they get a better idea of who you are and the work that you do, sir?
Sure. I mean, you already mentioned Boston University. I've been teaching there now for about 7 years, teaching journalism and investigative reporting. Before that, I was at the Boston Globe newspaper for about 20 years, and again, mostly did investigative reporting with a special interest in the criminal justice system.
Okay. Outstanding. Good to know. We want to get right started because you said you have an hour. Our show is normally 2 hours, so you want to be as efficient as possible for the time.
Great.
That we
Yeah.
have
No, I wish I could do it longer, but I gotta go at 5.
No problem.
My time. Yeah.
You are a white male. Is that correct, sir?
That's correct.
Okay. This program, the C.O.W.S, Context of White Supremacy, I have unfortunately concluded that we are in a global system of racism, white supremacy, and the definition that I use for both racism and white supremacy is a global system of people who classify themselves as white and are dedicated to subjugating and or abusing everyone in the known universe whom they classify as not white. Do you feel that such a system exists, and do you believe that that is an accurate definition?
Well, as far as you frame it, it seems accurate and consistent with your view. I'm not sure I can go that empirically. I certainly have known people who fit that definition, but as far as extending it to, I guess, your word universal, I just can't speak to that.
Okay. When I say white supremacy, just boiling it down, globally, white people collectively dominate non-white people globally in all areas of people activity. If I just was boiling down my definition, do you think white people dominate non-white people worldwide?
I think there are certainly domination. Yes, I just can't. I'm not comfortable speaking in absolutes and like that. I mean, historically, yes, there have been too many examples of that kind of dominance and racism, institutional, historical. But I just can't embrace the sweeping conclusion that you've reached.
Okay, no problem. And if I have no problem if they're just willing to say yes or no, no problem at all. We just share views on this program. So you don't believe that there's a global system of white supremacy. Is that correct?
I guess I don't believe there is a global system of white supremacy. I believe there are many white supremacists. But I can't agree that, because I just can't agree with that statement.
Okay, no problem. We're going to get to your book, The Fence, and talk about what happened in Boston specifically. I want to double check, see if my co-host, Justice, she is all of 10 years old, but she is a non-white person, and she does realize there's a system of racism, white supremacy, and she's trying to be as informed as possible to help us establish a system of justice. Justice, are you there?
Hello?
Yes, ma'am. We can hear you. If you have a question for Professor Lehr, go right ahead.
Do you know any ways of how to get money?
Do I know how to get money?
What ways do you know of how to get money?
What ways do I know how to get money?
Yes.
Is that the question?
Yes.
Work for it. Get a job.
Okay, thank you. That'll be all for now.
I'm muted. Okay. Sorry about that. Muted myself on that one. Professor Lehr, I'll shoot again now that I can be heard. Your book, The Fence, can you tell us what your purpose was in writing that book, what you were trying to accomplish in writing The Fence?
Sure. And can we first, can I take a few minutes to summarize the story that's telling in The Fence?
Certainly. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Well, the Fence is built around a case of police brutality in Boston, and probably one of the worst cases of police brutality in the city's history. And Boston goes way back, at least way back in this country's history. But this is a case with a real twist to it, in the sense that the victim of the police brutality turned out to be another police officer, a black officer working in plain clothes in the gang unit, who the other officers had mistaken as a fleeing shooting suspect. And what had happened that night was that there was a shooting in a late night diner type of restaurant, and it had led to a high speed chase through the streets of Boston that went on for 20-25 minutes, which in chase time is actually kind of like eons. And there were more than 20 cruisers involved. And the reason for the incredible police response was that the first 911 call that came into the department said that the shooting victim was an off-duty police officer. Whoever made that call, that wasn't accurate, but whoever made that call knew how to press the right button to get a police response into the neighborhood. And so you had this really intense, dramatic, high-speed chase with 4 shooting suspects in the lead car, followed by upwards of 20 police vehicles. And the chase ended in a dead end in Lower Roxbury, a neighborhood of the city. And it was surrounded by a fence, which is one of the reasons for the title of the book. And in that first police car was this officer I mentioned named Michael Cox and his partner. And they were in an unmarked police car, and they were dressed in plain clothes. And when the suspects jump out of their vehicle, Mike jumps out of his car, and he chases one of the suspects as he runs towards the fence. And the fence, the suspect goes flying over the fence. There was no bar on the top, and it was kind of soft, and there was a rollover. And the officer, Michael Cox, is he puts his hands up on the fence to pursue the suspect, when he's hit in the head from behind. And he turns to look stunned, and to try to figure out what's going on, and that's when he's hit again in the head. And then he goes down, and then he's kicked, and he's hit, and he's pummeled, and it's basically a Rodney King moment here in Boston. At some point, who knows how much worse it would have gotten, but at some point, one of the beaters realized, he said, it's a cop, stop. And so the beating stopped. They thought they were beating the heck out of a shooting suspect, which is unjustifiable in any way as it is. But here it was, one of their own. And instead of going to his aid, they actually stepped back and disappeared and went into hiding in the shadows and the darkness of the dead end. And they left Mike Cox alone, bleeding and unconscious, where a few minutes later he was found by other colleagues in his gang unit. And then in the aftermath, this is what kicks in then is this police, this blue wall of silence is what it's called, a police culture of cover-up and lying. Because by morning, when the officers were required to file an injury report for Michael Cox, they wrote down as the cause of the injury that he slipped on some ice. And that began the cover-up that went on for months and years, and really takes up the heart of the story that I'm telling in the fence, is the cover-up. And the reason I wrote the book is because these issues that came up in this case fascinate me, interest me, concern me. Brutality, profiling, and then this so-called blue wall of silence, this culture of lying that becomes an obstacle to justice. And I thought that the fact that in this case the victim turned out to be another Boston police officer would help illuminate and draw attention to these issues, because frankly, and I'm not, if it had been the shooting suspect or a drug dealer that they'd beaten, which it just wouldn't, it just doesn't make news the way this makes news. So it became for me a kind of a quintessential case to illuminate and try to explore how powerful all the issues I've been referring to in the past few minutes, how powerful they are when they come into play, and when again, the victim turns out to be a fellow police officer.
I just want to, I try to highlight things that I think are important as we move along in the program for our listeners.
Sure.
Very important. You said police brutality and this wall of silence and victim. I noted you did not say racism when you mentioned the forces that are at work, and it certainly, at least to me, from what I read of your work, it seems that racism was a major factor in this incident. I think you have a completely different story if Michael Cox is a white person.
Oh yeah. Well, I don't think the beating happens.
What? That would seem to me to indicate racism is the single greatest factor in this story, but you did not say racism when you mentioned.
Well, I think I mentioned the word profiling, and by that I meant that in no split seconds they were doing. All the officers were doing that racial profiling, assuming that this black guy's the guy we want, and then also not just arresting him, but kicking the living daylights out of him.
I agree.
You know what's also fascinating, Gus, is I want to mention, and I think this is part of what's, and I want to ask you what you think of this, because this was not a white on black beating, strictly. Both blacks and whites officers were involved in both the beating and then the cover-up afterwards. And that also became fascinating to me in terms of the power of the police culture. And it was my view, or my thinking, that the culture is so powerful that, in a sense, it trumped racial loyalty or brotherhood. There were black officers when they were in the aftermath of this criminal beating who had evidence, had witnessed the beating, and could have helped bring the beaters to justice. And they were, and it was in effect, I'm thinking of one officer in particular. He was on the fence. He knew full well that the beating that Michael Cox took, that could be me someday. And Michael Cox is a fellow black officer. and he struggled. Do I come forward with that and help bring justice to his beating and solve it and attack this problem, this issue? Or do I hunker down behind this pressure, the pressure of the blue wall, which is that you never provide evidence of wrongdoing or corruption against a fellow police officer? And it was an officer who, in my research, truly, he struggled with what to do. And in the end, he said he saw nothing. He didn't have anything that would help. And that's the choice he made, and it also cost him his career. And he was a good cop by all accounts, because he was eventually fired, found to have been lying, and in connection with this. So, that's to me, it's a complicated. That's what makes it more interesting, this whole case. But it's also it makes it more complicated in some ways.
Again, Professor Dick Lehr, Boston University. You said you had a question, but I didn't hear a question that. Oh,
okay. My question was, gosh, I guess I got lost in describing this complexity. The idea that something like the blue wall, the police culture, could trump race.
That doesn't sound like a question either. I guess if I was phrasing that as a question, does Gus think that the police culture trumps race? My answer would be absolutely not. Nothing trumps racism, white supremacy. I would say that what you just described is the power of racism, white supremacy, that you have a black person, a non-white person, participating in mistreating and ultimately covering up and being deceptive about the mistreatment of another non-white person shows just how powerful racism, white supremacy is. Norm Stamper, former chief of police, the Seattle Police Department, and author of Breaking Rank, he was on our program not quite a month ago, and he talked about how other non-white police officers, they told him they had an investigation of the San Diego Police Department, and they reported to him in that investigation that they used racial slurs and upheld racism, white supremacy, because that was the easiest thing to do to fit in, that they heard and observed other white police officers who were saying racist comments, who were practicing racism, and that in order to fit in with those officers, they too would make racist comments and uphold racism, white supremacy. I don't think that means the blue wall trumps racism. I think that shows just how salient racism, white supremacy always is. For the people listening in, hold on one second, I just want to highlight this so our listeners don't get confused. Even during so-called slavery, you would have non-white people, slaves, participating in going to catch fugitive slaves. This happens all the time, and this shows how much power the system of white supremacy wields, that you can get other non-white people to participate in mistreating and upholding the system of racism, white supremacy. That would be my response, because, again, you said this story doesn't happen. If Michael Cox is a white person, there is no story. Probably doesn't happen. That would be my response.
Yeah. I get. Maybe we're saying the same thing, in the sense that when I said it was trumping race, not racism, I'm agreeing with you that it's the racism, it's the culture that's affecting a non-white officer to cover up and do this, and in a sense, instead of loyalty to his to justice, to race, to his to realizing that, gosh, this could be me, this could happen to another black officer, a non-white officer. We've got to stand up to this. But instead, the power of the culture, the racism, that's what that's what I was asking about and trying to get at.
Oh, okay. That's why when you gave your initial summary of what you're talking about in your book, The Fence, I pointed out that you did not say the term racism, you used the term profiling. And that's why on this program, consistently, I try to reinforce with my listeners importance of words. I don't use the term racial profiling. Racism, that is the best term. That's what it is. I don't really know what racial profiling means. When I say they're practicing racism, bang, that's a home run. Everybody knows what we're talking about. Profiling, not quite the most accurate term. When you say, yes, the culture of racism is so strong that it trumps these officers' feelings of so-called brotherhood to another non-white officer, bang, I know exactly what you're talking about. We have 100% agreement. I totally agree. I did want to point out, because you mentioned this in your book, and I do think it's important. Boston is not, Selma, Alabama, Birmingham, Alabama, someplace, in the Confederate South where you've got, all the strife from the Civil Rights Movement and churches being blown up and slavery. Boston has a pretty thick legacy of racism, in my view, whether it's the Charles Stewart case, whether it's Ted Landsmark being speared by the American flag during the whole bus desegregation. Because you do mention the Charles Stewart incident in your book, and you even talk about a lot of the strife that happened in Boston with the school.
And then there's the famous busing era in the early mid '70s. The forced court-ordered busing in a bid to get the schools integrated. There was the violence that flowed from that was something that was played out on the evening news all around the country.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Boston. It's got a number of these moments in its history that get at race relations and racism and whatnot. And even today, as I've talked about this, been talking about the fence for the last 6 months, and gotten into the neighborhoods. Again, I've done book talks or book meetings with judges and lawyers who are part of the criminal justice system. And Boston is there's nothing unique about Boston as being a special place, or it's hard to measure where a city fits into the hierarchy of racism or positive race relations. But to hear I was at a dinner with a bunch of judges, Boston judges, and I'd say a third of them were black and Hispanic, and to hear one judge who I didn't know very well. I mean, I know of him through the years as a journalist and whatnot, and to have him just start talking about the fence, and he's from Boston, and how to this day he's been a judge for 20-something years, and how he knows when he drives home from downtown, from the courthouse into the neighborhood, he starts talking about the times he's been pulled over because he's black, and how he always knows. He says to me, I get pulled over, and I say, keep my hands on the wheel. Don't, and he goes through this thing, and then they'll flash the light, and they go, oh, Judge, he might get recognized. Judge, sorry about that. And he'll go, why did you stop me? And the officer will say, well, I think, one of your rear lights is out or something. and the judge is going, I know that's not true. I just know that's absolutely not true. I'm relaying this story that I heard because to try to answer your question. This is life in Boston, and it's he talked about it all being built in and hardwired in a way to not be surprised by it, to have a certain automatic response to it, like hands on the wheel, don't move, and he's talking about something now, and he's talking about something how it's always been for him in the city.
That gentleman's experience has been my experience, and every non-white person that I know who is honest about the world in which we live, which is why I do speak in absolutes about the system of racism, white supremacy, and its worldwide dominance. That is life under the system of white supremacy, that the constant mistreatment because you are not a white person. I did want to because in your book, The Fence, you talk about Michael Cox, the victim in all this, the non-white officer who was savagely beaten. I guess number one, you already talked about how initially the officers reported that he slipped on ice. That's what they told his wife. He had a fall on some ice and hurt himself. Officer Cox, Mr. Cox, he didn't go get Al Sharpton. He didn't, rage and stomp up and down and say, I am a victim of police brutality and racial profiling and this is absurd and da-da-da. He wasn't out picketing in front of the precinct. He really had a lot of faith that the right thing was going to be done. He didn't want to make a big deal about this. You talk about this in your work. Can you share kind of his attitude as things unfolded in this case?
Yeah, and Gus, I mean, you're raising a really important point, and which is, about, Michael Cox, because I think at the center of the story is Mike Cox, and his what I call his journey, because his initial response is exactly as you described it. He went home after the hospital. He was out of work for 6 months, recovering from his extensive injuries. I think I mentioned he grew up in Boston, so he had a lot of family here, and they were in effect in his face, saying, "Mike, they can't do this to you. They can't do it to anyone. You got to do something about this." By nature, by personality, he is a calm and quiet man. Okay, that's one thing about him. But the big thing is what you're getting at is that his initial response was this expectation, and I think now he would look back and consider it naivete, that the system was going to work. That within the ranks of the police department, the beaters would come forward and apologize and take whatever was due in terms of a punishment. He even went so far, he would go so far as to talk about that initial hit, that initial blow that he took to the head while he stood at the fence, in jeans and a big puffy down jacket, where he was mistaken for a fleeing suspect. As an officer, he would even defended that. Have heard him defend that as saying necessary force to disable a fleeing shooting suspect. That was a mistake. He did not at all welcome or accept or countenance in any way the brutality and excessive force that followed. But he believed that justice would come from within the system, and he kept telling his family, back off. Some ministers called the house, hearing about it as word got around, wanting to make an issue out of it. This is the kind of thing that happens far too often in our city, and he's saying, back off. And it was only after weeks and months went by when his expectations, not only were not met, but it even worsened, because as he was home recovering, the police world, his world, was wondering what was he going to do with this? Was he going to take the beating and roll over, or was he going to push it and make an issue out of it? He hadn't really said anything. He hadn't given any signals. And so what happened, and I think this is some of the most horrifying parts of his story, is in the middle of the night he began to get harassing phone calls, waking him and his family, his wife, up. And he can never prove it was other officers, but he knows in his bones it was. Calling, swearing at him, harassing him, calling him all kinds of names. And it was in his mind, he took it, and I think accurately, that it was an intimidation to stay down, keep your mouth shut, stay in the fold. And to the contrary, it was the thing that finally woke him up, and said, that people can't get away with this, and but he also realized that if he's going to find any justice, he's going to have to take matters into his own hands, not in a street justice sense, but he started working with a couple lawyers and started doing his own kind of basically, investigating his own crime and trying to figure out who did it, and eventually he did what very few officers do. He went to federal court and filed a federal civil rights lawsuit against a handful of officers, against the police department, and against the city. And he said, "Bring it on."
Again, Professor Dick Lehr, Boston University, author of The Fence. I want to see if Justice has some questions, but before I check, I did want to ask, do you suspect that the individuals, because you talk about a lot of harassment, tires being slashed,
yep.
Michael Cox tires being slashed in front of his home, to the point where he ended up having a video camera out on his car in front of his home, the phone calls in the middle of the night. Do you suspect this activity was from other enforcement officers?
Yeah, no, I'm with Michael. I believe he's right. Again, I don't know why they never tapped his phone or did that. But they were never able to prove it in a sense that he was brought to charges were filed or whatever. And how about I guess the other, the tire slashings, the phone calls, the phony 911, where officers came to his house on a bogus report of a domestic abuse. Talk about just a beating that just keeps going on. They show up and here he is, a beating victim, and they're just like rubbing it in his face,
Wow.
He went through a ton, all this just in many ways it got worse once it did become clear that he was fighting back, and wasn't just going to roll over.
Wow. I definitely have other things I want to get to with this as well, but Justice, are you there? If you have some questions you would like to ask Professor Lehr, go right ahead.
How is your book constructive?
How is it constructive?
Yes.
I'm repeating it because I'm having a little trouble hearing it. How is it constructive?
This is the question.
Okay.
How is your book constructive?
Instructive?
Constructive.
Well, I think in the sense that it focuses on a really horrific case of police brutality, and goes deep and wide in terms of bringing to life not only the people involved in the case, but also the city, and puts the case as best I can into the context of the issues that I'm exploring, of brutality, of racism, of the blue wall of silence in the police culture. And I see that. That's part of what I try to do, I think, or what most journalists try to do, be constructive in the sense that, exposing what goes on out there. I can tell you. I'm sorry, what, Justice?
You can go ahead and finish.
Well, I was going to say that, and I think one of the things I've learned whether it's in a story in the newspaper or in a book like this, is the number of people who, will read something like this and go, "Oh my gosh, I didn't know things like that happened or went on," and that's happened as part of when I go around talking about the book. I've gone to done some library talks in the greater Boston area, and the audiences, they're like stunned, and they're going, "This is happening in Boston. Could this happen in our community?" And I'm going, yeah, it's part of the culture. It's not unique to Boston. And I think that's in one way in which it's constructive. People hopefully open some eyes.
Okay, that'll be all for now.
Thank you.
Context of White Supremacy, Justice and Gus T Renegade, our guest, Professor Dick Lehr. 720, if you are listening, you want to get a question in before Professor Lehr exits at 5 p.m. Eastern, please call in because you wanted Professor Lehr on the program, and I would like to be able to have you to ask him a question since you wanted him on the show. So 720, give us a jingle before 5 p.m. Eastern if you'd like to ask a question. Professor Lehr, one of the things, one of many things that I found interesting about this case and your work, Kenny Conley, he was one of the officers. He was I guess they felt he was withholding information. They felt that he witnessed the abuse that Michael Cox suffered, but he didn't do anything. He was ultimately taken to trial, and eventually his conviction was overturned. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, that's right. That's a good summary of it. Yeah.
Okay. A lot of Mr. Conley generated a lot of support. There were a lot of individuals. He had bumper stickers, if I've done my research correctly, in Boston that said "Justice for Kenny Conley."
Right.
He had people who were really rallying to support him, who said, he didn't see it. He had what he called tunnel vision. He was focused on the chase for the shooting suspects in this incident. He was not paying attention to what happened with Michael Cox and the beating that he suffered. Can you share a little bit more about that Mr. Conley and your view on what happened with him?
Yeah, sure. To add to what you were just summarizing is that Conley was in one of the cruisers further behind in that police chase, and when his cruiser came into the dead end, he jumped out, and he ended up jumping over that fence that surrounded the dead end and chasing down the same shooting suspect that Mike Cox had originally been after when Michael was taken down at the fence. So Conley went over the fence and ran through the woods and captured this suspect. And one interesting note to point out is that when Conley made the arrest, it was a good arrest in the sense that lie down, get on your belly, and he cuffed him from behind, and then the police wagon was there. There were no kicks, there were no extra shoves, there were no punches, there were no whatever. And if you contrast that to what was happening at the fence, I've always found that an interesting juxtaposition. And then so Ken Conley, arrested the suspect that Mike had originally been chasing. In the aftermath, in the various investigations that went under, Conley did something that no other officer did that night. He basically wrote a report, because every officer was required to account for their whereabouts and their activities at the dead end, both in connection with the original shooting, but mainly in connection with the criminal investigation of the beating of Officer Mike Cox. And while so many officers wrote, well, I was over there, I was on the other side, I didn't see anything, I don't know what happened, he slipped on ice. Conley, responded and said he didn't know what happened, but he said he jumped out of his cruiser, ran to the fence, jumped over the fence, and chased down the suspect. If he wanted in any way, and common sense, and I think that's where I started, and certainly investigators started, who eventually went after Ken Conley. You get a report, and he said, "Oh, this guy, he ran to the fence and jumped over it." He might have seen something. He should have seen something. It's only common sense. And I think, to Conley's credit, when looking at all the evidence, if he wanted nothing to do with this investigation in terms of the beating, and he could easily have written a report like so many did, is that I don't know. I cut back this way and zigzagged through a hole in the fence, 20 yards this way, and then ended up doing a diagonal and cut the guy off. I have no idea what happened at the dead end. I mean, he could have taken himself out. Instead, he put himself into a position, by virtue of his report, where investigators eventually wanted to know what he saw. And he said, I didn't see anything. I wish I had. I should have seen something. But I didn't. And the federal investigators, who eventually took over the criminal investigation of the beating, put him before a grand jury. They didn't believe him. They thought he was kind of a standing metaphor for the blue wall of silence, and they did what they often do. They call it a squeeze. They squeezed him, thinking that if we apply enough pressure, he'll tell us what we want to hear, which is that he saw Mike Cox get beaten. And he was indicted for perjury and obstruction of justice. And you were referring to that, Gus. And he was facing 34 months in prison. And he eventually acquired a lot of support from all different parts of Boston life, thinking that he'd been railroaded and wrongfully convicted, which I came to believe he was, as a result of my research and looking at all the evidence.
I just want to contrast. Did you see any bumper stickers in Boston that said "Justice for Michael Cox"?
No, and talk about, what a statement that is. The absence of that.
I just and Mr. Conley, he is a white person. Is that correct?
He's white. He's from South Boston, which is the neighborhood where the busing violence. It's a largely Irish-American neighborhood, very insular, very cohesive. The fact that, on the one hand, in terms of neighborhood and dynamics, that a community that's so tightly knit would rally around Kenny Conley is not surprising. It's part of their culture, the culture there, and their lifestyle. And in the end, what I viewed, the government was trying to exploit those qualities. They wanted people to know that he was white and he was from South Boston, and that he fit the profile in their view of a white racist from South Boston. And I don't think it fits in Kenny Conley's case. At the end of the day, but it's true. There were these, and there's a disconnect, and I think it's, the victim here was Mike Cox, and where's the justice for Mike Cox? And that is one of the real problems in this story and in the history of this case, which I was getting at in the fence. And I wonder, and again, I don't know the answers to some of these things. I know, for example, even though Mike's from Boston, there's no way his neighborhood, the different neighborhoods he's lived in, there isn't the cohesion, the organization that ends up resulting in, at least in Boston, in these neighborhoods, that would result in protest, a march, justice for Mike Cox. And I think that's regrettable. I don't know, and again, we talked about in the beginning, in the immediate aftermath, and some ministers didn't called, and Mike said, back off, justice will be served, it'll give it a chance. Well, I don't think, the ministers necessarily, especially after some weeks went by, had to remain silent. Mike may not want the attention, and he wants to see it through in his own way. But this was a public, a horrific case of one of the worst case of police brutality in the city's history. I think a lot of people should have been standing up and sounding off, with or without Mike by their side.
White and non-white people, correct?
Absolutely.
I'd want to give one thing, because I think 720 did call in, so I want to ask one and then go to 720. You talked about when the incident initially happened, the reports in the Boston Globe and the Boston Herald immediately following the beating. Were these reports accurate as to what happened, and do you think what was reported in the Boston Globe and the Boston Herald, do you think that was a part of the cover-up of what happened to Michael Cox?
Well, I think, and again, I was at the Globe, at Globe at the time. Part of the cover-up in the sense that we didn't do our jobs. We're not, there's no, in my mind, evidence, and I don't believe any kind of conspiracy with those covering up. But we dropped the ball. We should have been on this story better than we were. And it goes to okay, well, how do we find out news? Well, sometimes it's because a huge event happens, like a building blows up or burns down, and we react to it. Other times it's when someone stands up and screams and yells enough and draws attention to the news. And other times it's because we're supposed to be connected, have a sense of what's going on in the streets. And we missed it here. On the one hand, the victim, Michael Cox, didn't want to make any noise, so he wasn't standing up, drawing attention to the problem. You had a police department and a union. The whole law enforcement didn't want to draw any attention to it. It was a huge embarrassment. It was a scandal. And so days and weeks went by before the two major papers in the city began to get an inkling that what happened that night was not this high-five moment of policing when they, after this long, dramatic Hollywood-style police chase, they successfully arrested 4 murder suspects, that there was a more to the story, and that was this horrific beating of a black Boston police officer. But it was very hard to get information. Everyone was in hunker-down, cover-up mode, and I think it was a disgrace in terms of the city's mayor and the police commissioner for not coming out strong and directly in the immediate aftermath and saying something went terribly wrong last night or 2 nights ago, and we're determined to get to the bottom of it. Nothing like that happened. There was a complete failure of leadership. But I don't. While I feel like I've looked at this and come up with reasons or explanations why it went uncovered for a while, I still don't. I still think that we failed as a media, which is to, be getting stories like this and holding, trying to do our best as we can to holding power accountable and pressing for explanations and for, looking at it independently and trying to figure out what the heck happened here.
I want to get 720 if he did ring in because he requested your presence here.
Okay.
720, is that you?
That is I.
Outstanding. Go right ahead with your questions.
Sounds like you two know each other.
He's a loyal listener.
Thank you, victim. Greetings, Professor Lehr.
Hello.
My question is how. It's a 2-part question. How specifically is your book being received in Boston and in other parts of the country?
In Boston, in this region, I'll just define the received in a couple different ways. It's been a bestseller here. It was during the summer, the Globe bestseller list. It was being bought and read, and I did a lot of talks and have continued to do a lot of book events. And as by the same token, nationally, I don't think it's made that bridge beyond to a general audience around the country the way it's hit locally, and I'm not sure why. But all I can do is write the book and try to do the best job I can. In terms of the readership around here and the reception, and this is what you try to do, I think, as a journalist, is what it's all about. You try to stir the pot, and it's got people talking. It's got the police commissioner talking about the issues that are in the mix in the book, and but talk is one thing and action's another. And I've been around the city for long enough to have heard some of the same cycles of promises of attacking the police culture of lying and cover up before, and very little has really in a concrete way come of it. The new police commissioner citing the fence and some other things that have happened in the news around here is promising a new era of accountability in terms of police accountability and truthfulness, and is saying if we catch an officer lying, it's a firing offense. So I mean, on the one hand, that's good. On the other hand, hopefully it's more than a public relations moment, because it's those kinds of statements get them on the front page of the newspaper here. And around the country, I know I can't measure it really. I've done a fair amount of radio. I've done a fair amount of talks. I was on a panel at the Harvard Kennedy School, and I was on the panel with me was the police chief in East Palo Alto, California. And he mentioned how he had read it, and other people he knows in the police world out there have read it, but I don't know how to really measure that kind of thing.
Well, you generally do that by the amount of money that's coming in, don't you?
Well, maybe in 6 months or 12 months I'll know more about that, because I don't see any of that for now. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm. I did want to say I wanted to find out firsthand what goes on in terms of this blue wall of silence, and I do know that in terms of racial profiling and all these other adjectives that you want to use to describe what goes on in terms of with police officers and their victims, particularly their non-white victims, that every time I was on the scene with white officers who wanted to get their Joneses off, and they wanted to victimize another non-white person, this always happened, because eventually I started to have a certain reputation. The non-white victims would always say to me, "You know what would have happened if you hadn't been here?" And I would say, "What do you mean?" Knowing exactly what they mean. And they would say to the person, "They would have killed my ass just like any other nigger."
Mm-hmm.
They would have killed my ass just like any other nigger. Now, what I do want to say is this. If you've done the research that I see in your book, it's extremely difficult for me to think that speaking with white officers and such, that just your common sense wouldn't come through and tell you, my goodness, this really doesn't have anything to do with all this racial profiling, so to speak, or anything whatsoever. This is flat out white supremacy. So it's difficult for me to listen to those kinds of things, as I said, because I did find out firsthand, specifically for that reason, to find out.
Okay, is there a question in there?
That's a comment. I say I find.
Okay, that's what I thought. Yeah, no, it's interesting. Yeah.
Yes. So I don't want to take up any more time, but thank you, victim. I appreciate you allowing me to get a question.
Oh, no problem. We're almost at the 5 mark. I want to check to see if you have any questions before Professor Lehr exits.
No.
Okie dokie. Before we wrap things up with Professor Lehr, I did want to ask, do you think it would be accurate to say that Michael Cox in this incident a victim of racism? Do you think that's an accurate statement?
Yes.
Okay.
There's no question of that in my mind, actually.
Okay. I also think it's important to point out, was anyone criminally charged in the incident of what happened with Michael Cox?
No, and that's a tragedy. This was a criminal beating, and by police officers, and the system failed to bring any criminal charges against his beaters.
Wow. Because you did point out that he did make civil charges, and I believe he did win some of his civil cases.
He to his credit, I mean, everyone was against him in a sense, in terms of the culture and the system, to go away. But he succeeded in winning a civil rights verdict against some officers who unfortunately should have also, I think, been charged criminally, but the criminal authorities said they didn't have enough.
Wow. Just in your investigation, do you feel you uncovered enough in the research you did for this book that would have been enough for criminal charges?
I think I think an aggressive prosecutor there was enough certainly for a couple. I'm thinking of a couple of, and frankly, one guy in particular, the primary beater. I think I think a prosecutor should have tried to make that case. If nothing else, just to, and maybe it's never a slam dunk, and I think it would have been maybe a tough case, but I think you do it for the sake of everyone. Hopefully win, but win or lose. And I don't. So I think they should have tried, at least on this one primary guy I'm thinking of.
Wow. Our last 30 seconds before Professor Lehr is out of here, I want to get 916 in because I do see a hand. This will be our last question. 916, are you there?
Yes, I am. Gus, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Loud and clear. Go right ahead.
Okay, great. Greetings.
Hello there.
Sir, I just had a quick question for you. How is this the worst case of police brutality in Boston's history as compared to many other cases where non-white males or non-white females have been killed by the police?
Well, I mean, if I didn't say it, I should say worst known case, because I think there are a lot of cases we don't know about. And in terms of the known cases of police brutality, what happened to Mike Cox is the worst that we know about. I'm talking a little bit in circles, but in the research and others who know the civil rights violations in history here in town, this was the worst known beating.
Worst known beating.
Yeah, that's if I didn't use the word known, I meant to before, because that's how I usually say it, because there are a lot of beatings we don't know about.
Okay. And so in all the known beatings, none of those beatings resulted in someone's death?
No, not that we know about.
Okay. That was my question.
Yeah, no. I mean, that's an important distinction.
Outstanding. Again, Professor Dick Lehr, Boston University, author of The Fence. I want to thank you for taking some time out of your Saturday afternoon to come and speak with us. I think constructive information. We appreciated hearing from you, sir. I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend. Keep up the good work. Let people know what happened with Mr. Cox. I think this is a very important story, and I hope more people read your book and become aware of what happened.
Well, thanks, Gus. I appreciate the time with you.
Thank you, sir. We will be in touch, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you. We're going to take a quick commercial. Be right back. Context of White Supremacy, Gus T Renegade, and Justice. Taking a quick commercial. We'll be right back.
Is racism hurting you? On issues of race, are you unable to speak, think, and act with clarity and confidence? Are you tired of laughing when nothing is funny, smiling when you are not happy, agreeing when you really disagree? At counterracism.com, you can learn specific strategies and techniques to counter the behaviors of the people who practice racism in all areas of activity, using words correctly, following counter-racist logic, even counter-racist science projects designed to reveal what racism is, how it works, and how to counter it. The open-source code writing format allows you to pick and choose from a variety of counter-racist suggestions so you can produce the code that works for you. Stop by counterracism.com today and help replace racism with justice.
That's counter-racism.com.
Welcome to the desert of the real.
Peace, family. This is your brother, Holla, a.k.a. Mr. Holipsis, a.k.a. the Buzz Killer. Tune in to Holipsism's Haven every Sunday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where we discuss the social, economic, and political issues of the day with a common-sense approach, an African-centered perspective, and a universal sensibility. Call-in number 347-843-4874. That's 347-843-4874. To check out related YouTube videos, blogs, and show archives, visit www.holipsism.com. That's www.holipsism.com. www.holipsism.com. I'm making it hard to get your Negro on. Hotep, Black Power.
There's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad.
Context of White Supremacy, Gus T Renegade, and Justice. That was Professor Dick Lehr, author of The Fence. Pretty interesting read. And Dick Lehr gave us a demonstration. Liam Sheff was not willing to just say, I don't believe there's a system of white supremacy moving forward. Dick Lehr, I don't believe it. We can move forward and talk about your work. No problem. A few things I was going to share before we wrap things up, and we have some callers on the line so they can share their view on what Dick Lehr had to say. And Justice, did you have a question or comment?
Yeah, I wanted to share my email address.
Go right ahead.
justice.asap@yahoo.com. Again, justice.asap@yahoo.com.
Outstanding. I'll say that one more time in case you didn't get it. Justice.asap@yahoo.com. Dick Lehr, The Fence. I think he did have constructive information. I found it interesting. I really didn't see a lot of media attention around what happened with Michael Cox or his book. Now, it may be that I'm out of the loop and, I just, haven't been paying attention and missed it, but I think this is the sort of thing that should have been on CNN and everywhere, the same way that what happened with Tiger Woods and his SUV, this should have been everywhere. An enforcement official, a fellow officer, is savagely beaten and they lie about it. I mean, wow. That's the system of white supremacy. That's why I have this program, because these sorts of incidents, this is what you should expect. And if you do more research on what happened with Michael Cox, you will see other people talking about non-white enforcement officials. This type of thing has happened to other non-white enforcement officials where they were not recognized by their other white officers. They just thought it was a random nigger and beat him down or did whatever. I think one incident that I read in doing research for this program, a non-white officer was killed by his other white officers. They didn't recognize him, just thought he was another victim that they could mistreat, and, they did. Before I go to the folks on the line, I did want to share the programs coming up. The C.O.W.S has next weekend on lock, Thursday through Sunday. There's a show every day. Matt Ray will be here Thursday afternoon. Dr. Frances Cress-Welsing will be making her second trip to the C.O.W.S on Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 noon Eastern, 11 a.m. Central. She'll be making her second trip. That's Friday. Saturday, we'll have William Pepper, author of Act of State. He was one of the prosecutors who was on the case of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination in 1998. Case, if you were listening when Stephen Bezruchka was on the program, he talked about that very underreported case where they said that James Earl Ray was not the shooter of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., that the United States government, most likely the people who participated, set up, and organized the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., William Pepper. He will be here Saturday afternoon, and Sunday, Charles Mills, author of The Racial Contract. He will be here next Sunday, full weekend of the C.O.W.S. And I believe Cree has a program that will be after the C.O.W.S program next Sunday on the 12th, or I'll just say the date, the 12th. It's next Saturday. She has a program next Saturday after the C.O.W.S. She'll have Tommy Hart. He'll be back for part 2. Counter-Racist Evolving Engineer. Her program is next Saturday, so make sure you support her efforts as well. The chat room is open now. I shared my views on the chat room with Liam Sheff last week. I'm not a fan of the chat room, so I'm going to open it up an hour into the program because I feel people have been consistently missing information on the shows consistently. So this is part of my code now in operating the program. I'm going to open the chat room about a halfway point in the program, and then you can go in and make your comments or questions or what have you. So the chat room is open now. If you're listening live, all you have to do is refresh the page, and the chat room should be open, so you can post anything you like in the chat room. I will think about whether or not I want to open the chat room for the full show when Dr. Welsing is here on Friday. Right now, I'm thinking no, but I'll think about it. Maybe I'll change my mind between now and Friday. But Cree, Counter-Racist Evolving Engineer, her program is going to be Saturday at 5 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Central, 2 p.m. Pacific. It's December 12th. It'll be part 2 with Mr. Tommy Hart, Counter-Racist Evolving Engineer here at Blog Talk Radio. So make sure you support her efforts. Since we do have a lot of people who are still on the line with us, I will double check and see if they have comments and or questions that they would like to share about the broadcast. 916 111. That's Mr. 720. You're on. 916. You're on. 980. You're on. And 253. You're on. Questions, comments you would like to make?
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes, we can hear you. Oh, we need to go one at a time. Wait a minute. We need to go one at a time. Maybe I'll take control. 980, because we didn't hear from you. 980, are you there? If 980, if you were just speaking, you are not clear. I cannot hear you. There's a lot of distortion in your call, 980.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Are you 980?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. It's very interesting. I don't recall hearing about it. I know that I have people that are in Boston. Boston. It's very clear racial divide. It's been very suppressed. I really didn't hear a whole lot of it. It's mind blowing that even Shields, race, the code of for that to happen, that's a mind-blowing.
980, there's a lot of distortion in your line. Like, I'll hear you clearly for about 2 to 3 seconds, and then there'll be a really intense echo effect. I was trying my best to listen, but it's really hard for me to decipher what you're saying. I don't know if it's poor reception or what, but it's a real challenge for me to pick out what you're saying. I did catch that you said you have residents or people that you know who are in the Boston area, and you said that this incident was not reported, that you hadn't really heard a lot about it either. I did catch that part. The rest of it was kind of difficult. I don't know if you have the ability to maybe move around or check your signal to see if that's the problem. I don't know if you're traveling, if you're in a vehicle, or even if you're on a cell phone. But there's a lot of distortion in your line, sir. I'll check back to see if it's cleared up in a moment, because I do want to hear what you have to say. I'll go in order since, or you all can just speak out as 3 people now. 916-253 and Mr. 720, you're all there.
Well, I found the show, this is Mr. Nero from 916. I found the show very interesting from the standpoint that it seems to me that these incidents, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it almost seems to me like these incidents and writing about it, kind of serve 2 purposes. One, the author obviously gets a book out, is able to write a book, and then the second thing just seems to continue to perpetuate the roles of the victims and the victimizers. Kind of reminding everybody, hey, here's how we're all supposed to behave, victims remain victims. The victimizers, this is what happens, and you guys follow suit as well. I mean, it seems to me that that's the only purpose that these books really serve. Because it's certainly not dismantling the system of racism and white supremacy. You know, it just seems to highlight behaviors, and it doesn't, you know, it doesn't say, hey, here's how we remedy it, or, you know what I mean? It doesn't prescribe any form of treatment for the victimizers as well as the victims to, you know, to either victims either being able to cope, or victimizers being able to, you know, find out why they continue to do these things. Because I didn't hear in any of the things he said, I didn't hear really any disciplinary actions being levied on these enforcement officials. Now, I haven't read the book.
Mm.
And he didn't harp on it either. You know, he wasn't outraged. I'm outraged by the fact that there was no disciplinary actions. He didn't sound outraged to me about it. You know, there was a little shock, I guess, that this is going on. But, I mean, is there really shock? I mean, why is this even so shocking to him? I mean, you know, anyone, please feel free to correct me. I mean, I'm just trying to figure out what is the purpose of these types of books that just highlight the behaviors of the victimizer and the victim and doesn't prescribe a solution.
Let's see. I believe I asked him what his purpose in writing the book was, and I think he said he wanted to highlight police brutality, profiling. I think he mentioned something else. He did not say racism. He did not.
No, he didn't.
He did not say racism. He did not say that he was writing this book with the intention of replacing racism, white supremacy with justice, or offering any solutions or corrections to this problem. He did not say that.
No, he didn't. And Justice asked the question, how is your book constructed?
Yes. I can say I didn't know about this case at all. I'd never heard of Michael Cox, Mr. 720, who's with us now on the line. He mentioned this book to me and suggested getting Professor Lehr on the program, so I wouldn't have known anything about it. As a victim of racism, white supremacy, I found the information interesting, and what he had to say interesting. I don't really know how it. I'm not really sure how it would compare with Norm Stamper. Like, I found Norm Stamper's book very constructive. That's something I need to know. That's a book I would highly recommend. This book, I think what happened with Michael Cox is important in illustrating the ugliness of racism, white supremacy.
Oh, absolutely.
But
no, the story needed to be told. I don't disagree with that. You know what I mean?
Yes,
it definitely needed to be told. But I'm just wondering now, after hearing the story, along with several other stories, I'm going, what is this really? I mean, what is the real purpose behind these stories ultimately? When you look at them as sort of as a collage, I mean, it just seems like a trail of this is how we want everybody to behave, and we're just going to put this in book form for those who will get this book, will be able to see what's going on and ultimately how everyone behaves. Because it does not challenge the behavior at all. None of them do. And so, and ultimately, great segue, I'm actually dealing with some enforcement official nonsense right now. One of our drivers with the cab company where I lease a cab from decided to rob a bank in the town that I live in.
Wow.
And as a non-white male living in this, little small city, I became suspect number 2 after they apprehended him.
Wow.
So I'm currently under investigation for bank robbery.
Wow. Did the enforcement officials have they come to question, talk to you, ask you a barrage of questions and all that good stuff?
Absolutely.
Wow.
And I remember, I'm not sure if I saw the video regarding the law professor on the code.net or if I just caught it on YouTube. Do you remember a series of videos that was uploaded on the code that basically discussed why you shouldn't speak to an enforcement official?
On the code?
Yeah.
I want to say no. I don't think I recall it.
I will put the link there. He basically, it's like an eight series videos on YouTube, and he basically gives all the reasons why you just should not speak to an enforcement official, whether you're in trouble or not. Now, I had watched that series twice, and when they contacted me, when the detective called me on my cell phone, I was in a drive-thru, fortunately, and so I had time to put him on hold until I finished going through the drive-thru. And what ran through my mind was that video and how I really shouldn't say anything, right? I should just basically, I believe you had mentioned once you should ask the question, am I a person of interest? And depending on their response, that dictates my next move,
Right.
But as I'm thinking about this, as he's on hold, he's just called me. Obviously, it's just like a punch in the stomach. You don't expect to get such a phone call. I'm saying to myself, okay, I can go that route. But if I don't cooperate with this person, because I live in a small city, if I don't cooperate with this person, I'm like 1 mile away from the police department.
Wow.
They can make my life hell. You know what I mean?
Yes,
they
sir.
can pull me over every chance they get and make my life, a hell. And I said, well, probably not best for me to go that route in this particular case. So I decided to cooperate. And the officer was respectful, and he didn't badger me too much. But ultimately he got the information he needed, and he went on about his business. But I am still being investigated. I've given them rides now. They have a couple of undercover officers or enforcement officials asked for, I guess, a cab or whatever, and I went and picked them up yesterday. So I know I'm being investigated. I guess they think I'm just going to say something stupid, as if I'm, as if I was in on this bank robbery, And so, from their perspective, I understand they have to, make sure that this guy acted alone. So I get that. What I don't get is how just because I live in Roseville, California, this is the city that I live in, I automatically become suspect number 1. And so I had someone else tell me, a white male tell me that, no, that's not the reason. It's because you're black. I said, interesting.
This white person, was he an enforcement official?
No. He was someone else I had given a ride to, and we had touched on the story a little bit, and he said that he was on probation. No, he said he was a parolee, and that he had a business of a couple of years back of, I don't know if you guys have this in your area of the world, but occasionally you'll see people standing on the corner with a sign basically saying eat here or shop here or whatever. Well, during the real estate boom, they would have people on the corner with these big signs basically saying, come this way to the new development of homes that they were building. And so he had a business where he only hired parolees to go out here and, stand on the corner in the county that I live in, which is called Placer County. And so in Placer County, he said he was sending all these different people to all these different places, and the ones that got harassed consistently were black. They got ticketed, they got harassed. He said he could go up there with no problem, drive with the van doors open, and handing signs out to guys. He said no problem. But if I send a black male up in that same area, he'd come back with several tickets.
Wow.
I said, wow. So he said, no, I don't. He told me, I don't want you to think it's for no other reason other than you're black. I said, wow, that's very interesting. Thank you very much.
That is constructive. I wish we had. I wish more white people would just honestly tell non-white people that. I think that would cut down a lot of the confusion that non-white people have about, why these sorts of things, Michael Cox and your situation and Tiger Woods, any other situation that's happening worldwide. I wish we had more white people who were stepping up and being honest in that manner, just saying, hey, you're being mistreated. I'm not coming to correct your mistreatment. I just don't want you to have any illusion about what's happening. This is
he didn't want me to have. That is correct. Oh, he was adamant about it.
Yeah, like I said, I wish more white people were stepping up and were doing that on a consistent basis. I think that would be very helpful for the non-white people. Very helpful. Man, that's tough. As I said, when Neely Fuller Jr., when he was on the program earlier this week, into that program, I said I highly suspect, as a result of the shooting that happened in this area, Seattle, Washington, that happened over last weekend, I highly suspect a whole lot of black people, it's going to be much, much tougher, especially if you're a black male. Police are going to be in a real ugly mood in how they deal with black males. I suspect all across this area of the world. I know I have had my own ugliness with enforcement officials earlier this week, and I suspect it's happening to tons of black males, black people in general, non-white people in general, but especially black people everywhere just as a result of that shooting. I suspect it's going to be for a long time. I've heard enforcement officials talking about it. Back at the bus, he said he was checking out some police blogs, and they were talking with glee about shooting, whoever they thought was the suspect in this, and they just wanted to go out and shoot this person. They did not sound like they were talking about justice or behaving in a correct manner according to how they are supposed to function as enforcement officials. They just wanted to go and shoot somebody, shoot and kill somebody as a result of what happened. So, I did want to ask you about Dr. Williams, because you recommended him on the program, so I want to make sure I get that. But I wanted to double-check with 720 because he requested Professor Lehr to be on the program, so I wanted to see if just what his thoughts were on Professor Lehr, what he had to share, if he felt it was constructive, or maybe he has some thoughts on the purpose of these works. Mr. 720, are you there?
I'm here. let's see. As regards in terms of it being constructive, I think when I first mentioned him to you, my ultimate purpose, because I also heard him do another interview on another radio show, and what was coming through to me, because I do like to rely on my analytical senses as well as my intuitive senses as much as possible. And what was coming through was, I guess, just condescension. And I got the feeling that, and I do believe he said at the first part of your interview, which I found very interesting, he said he was always interested in, I guess, brutality and beatings. I don't know if he said injustice and things of that nature, but that he had an interest in it. And I was curious. I did want to ask, but I didn't want to take up too much time with my questions. I did want to ask him why he had such an interest in that. But at any rate, as I listened to him on the other show, I suspected that he was simply another white supremacist. That's what I suspected. And I figured I wanted to have a bit more information, and I figured that the questions you would ask would be a bit more pointed about white supremacy, and perhaps he would say some things that would be a bit more revealing in terms of the things that were coming through to me. And indeed they were, particularly when he point blank said that at first he was talking about profiling, and then when you said, I want to be clear, make this clear, I want to point this out for my listeners, that we're talking about white supremacy here. And then he switched. But he switched only after you said that.
Mm-hmm.
So I suspect had nothing been said, and it would have just gone on as usual in terms of simply being profiling and whatever other labels they want to give to it, you know.
Yes, sir.
So no, in that regard, it was extremely constructive for me. Also, I think Justice's first question, which I found to be so pointed, and I think this also, as far as I'm concerned, addresses some of Mr. Nero's question in terms of why did he write the book. And as I say, regarding Justice's first question, which I found was very pointed, and he seemed to be taken aback when she asked, how do you make money? Oh, well, what did he say? Get a job or work, whatever he said. And I thought to myself, seems like that book of yours, seems like that book of yours is making you some money, because as you said, Renegade, I've not heard anything about Cox's book. You see what I'm saying?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So, and you know, overall, with the white people that come on the show, like I said, and I had a question, something I formulated. It slipped my mind now. Oh gosh, it's a pretty important question for me too. Well, it'll come back to me. But the white people, again, they consistently show that they don't really want anything to change in terms of the way this system is working, and in terms of particularly the mistreatment that is being shoved down the throats of non-white people millisecond to millisecond. I don't think they really want any of that to change at all, nor do I think they have any intention of changing it at all. So it does continue to be curious to me why, I'm not certain, which is curious in and of itself, if there will be any of them to come on and have something truly constructive to give us in terms of eliminating this white supremacist system and replacing it with justice. And by that I mean oftentimes the guests come on, and indeed the information is constructive, and they give us specific examples of things that are going on, maybe specific numbers that we may not know. But I know for myself, in general, they're not really telling me anything that I don't know. Maybe I don't know there's 200 billion black people that are being murdered, as opposed to the 100 that I may see or know of. You see, they may give me something like that. But I know that the injustices are being committed, and I know that they're being committed by white people. And so in terms of giving us something that's really going to start us in a direction that's going to eliminate that, I don't know that there's been any white guest that's given me something like that. You know, I don't know that I can say in any way that that's happened.
I don't really have an expectation that white people are going to spill the beans in terms of this is what you can do to take apart the system of white supremacy. I doubt any white person is going to do that, as Mr. Fuller said when he was on the show earlier this week, that white people are not going to construct a university or program at any university that is designed to inform non-white people how you deal with racism. They're not going to do. I don't expect that they're going to do it. I would be stunned if they did, and if they do construct such a program, I would be highly suspicious until I see it in action and I actually see how what they tell you to do works against racism. I think the non-white people, the victims of white supremacy, ultimately, we will be the ones that will have to come up with what needs to be done to take this system apart. And I think a big part of that is getting more non-white people informed about the system and working on ideas to codify, what you do to work against white people when they try to practice racism. I think those are things that non-white people should be working on, getting more non-white people informed and getting more non-white people thinking of strategies. So, I don't expect, I would be stunned if a white person ever came on the program and spelled exact ideas for things that we could do to replace white supremacy with justice, go do this, and this. I would be stunned.
I think that's the perfect word. I would be stunned myself. I think you couldn't have used a better word. Kind of like what, tased?
Yeah, exactly. And I don't even know that such a thing exists. I think a big part of replacing white supremacy with a big part of why I think racism, white supremacy is so effective is because so many of us are stunned. So many of us, when Mr. Nero just said, the white person came and told him, I don't want you to be confused about this. This is happening because you're black. So many of us don't understand that. I think that's why the system is so incredibly intense at this point and so powerful, is because so many of us are confused about this system. And even in Professor Lehr and what he said on the program today, racial profiling and the wall of silence, and even the curveball he tried to slip in there. I hope everybody caught that when he said, well, there were black people who participated in this beating, so that's that sort of thing. So many of us are confused about what's happening that it makes it so much easier for white people to practice racism. I think if more of us had a better understanding of the system of racism, white supremacy, and had an understanding that when these things happen, yes, it's because I'm not white. That's why this stuff is happening. I think we would be moving in the right direction. I hope, that would be my view on it.
And again, that's why the last show that you had, I thought was so extremely constructive. And although it came across as a bit comical, the tragic side of it is that, indeed, when black people were first brought to these shores by the enslavers, the white enslavers, they were under no illusions or no confusion as to who was enslaving them and what their place was in the system. None whatsoever, as far as I'm concerned.
Mm.
Now, I think that if we were, as Mr. Fuller says, all on the bottom of those ships, once again, in those chains, and we could physically see those chains around our legs, feet, necks, and wherever else they had them, I don't think we'd be under any illusion at that point where we stood and where they stand.
Hear, hear. Hear, hear. I agree wholeheartedly. Some people in the chat room, they said that they caught when I was, I guess, questioning him about his use of the term profiling and him not using the term racism. that he immediately wanted to respond with a question, and he didn't even have a question. I hope people caught that too. He did not have a question. He just made statements. I had to ask repeatedly. I even had to make the question for him. He had no question. He just had statements. Which is that right there. That is exactly why the chat room is closed, because I think people miss things like that on the program routinely. That I can't spoon feed everything during the program. I can't stop and call out everything when something happens. I try to catch some and just highlight if I think it's real important. But some things you just got to catch. As Lauren Ashley said, you cannot really play video games and listen to the cows. You really got to pay attention. As I was telling a non-white person earlier this week, sometimes these white people, they will sound great. They'll say everything. They'll say white supremacy. They will sound phenomenal. It'll just be 5 words will be out of place or incorrect. It'll just be 5 words. You really got to be listening closely to catch those 5 words. With Mr. Lehr, 1 word, it was profiling, not racism, or it'll be the absence of a word. He never said racism until he was called on it. You really got to be paying attention to catch and really make the listening experience as efficient as possible to really catch what's happening. That's why the chat room is closed, at least for the first hour of the program, so people can, I hope, do a better job of listening and catching information that's happening on the program. Justice, is that you?
Oh, yeah.
Go right ahead.
Thanks for everybody for calling in. I'm gonna go now.
Oh, she's out. That's right. She's out riding. Okay, can you give your email address really quick?
Yeah. justice.asap@yahoo.com.
Groovy. justice.asap@yahoo.com. Are you hanging up?
I don't. If I hang up, I don't know if it will. I don't know if you can still talk.
Can you use mute, or are you hanging? If you can use mute, then we can finish up. We have about maybe 10 minutes. If you can't use mute, then that's okay too.
I can use mute.
Oh, okay. If you can use mute, we'll finish up quickly, and things will be over.
Okay.
Groovy. Justice.asap@yahoo.com. There we go. Thank you for the update, sharing constructive information. I don't think I was talking there. Who was chatting? Hello? I don't think I was the person chatting.
I think I was going to add something, but I thought Justice had something to say. So
Did you lose your thought?
Yes.
Oh, sorry about that.
But basically, I think I was just going to agree with you. But I was going to say this. This is what it was. Like you say, sometimes it may just be a few words. I think the unfortunate part of all that is the bigger part where non-white people hear all the good, great things that they think the white person is saying. Unfortunately, that's what sticks. And when those few words are pointed out, they find ways to defend and protect the white person by pointing out the good things the white person said and just drowning out completely those 5 words which are key in terms of their white supremacist ways.
And once again, I think. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. You may complete your thoughts.
No, Mr. Nero, I'm finished.
Oh, okay. No, I think ultimately it just goes back to what you and Gus were mentioning earlier, as far as the monumental task that we have, and wherever you're at, in your area of the world, of informing people of this show, The Cows, because when you really go back and listen to the archives, you see the patterns developing with white people and how they play and manipulate words. I mean, you know what I mean? Especially if you can listen to episodes back to back. But you really get a strong sense of how they play with people and how they manipulate people with words and wordplay. Because I love it when Gus, calls them on it. and says, whoa, 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 wait a minute, you know.
Oh, yeah.
I love it. And I think non-white people, once they begin to really understand that there just is a system, because I'm having a hard time just, you know, explaining that to people. And getting non-white people to, you know, admit, hey, wait a minute, something's not right. You know, because they don't accept the notion that there's a system of racism and white supremacy in place. Most of the non-white people that I come in contact with say, oh, no, racism is, you know, almost a thing of the past now. I mean, is anyone else having that experience?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, I think we have evidence of that on the cows with many of the non-white guests who said that, you know, they don't believe there's a system of racism, white supremacy. In fact, Yellow Manny, people who are familiar with the cows, I was speaking with him yesterday, and he said he spoke with a black female who is a college student, so she's supposed to be, you know, pretty well informed. And she said, direct quote, she has transcended race, and that racism is not a problem for her. She doesn't deal with it. You know, she's over that. She doesn't have an issue about that at all. So yeah, I see that problem all the time, where non-white people don't think that, you know, there is any more racism.
Man, so I think just continuing to do that work right there, because once upon a time I didn't see it either, and it wasn't until I was exposed to Mr. Fuller's work, you know, pretty much became my you know, enlightening period of racism and white supremacy is what it is and how it works, because I too was in denial of many things and just figured, well, that's just the way it is, I guess, you know.
Well, you know,
I was one of those black folks that just believed, you know, we ought to just pull ourselves up. No one's holding us down. I mean, that used to be my belief system just a few years back. You know, so I mean, that's how phenomenal this machine is that they put together.
Well, you know, as regards that, Mr. Nero, what I'm noticing is, you know, as far as pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps and whatnot, there seems to be a new thing in terms of this refining of white supremacy. At least this has become very interesting to me with all this talk. I suspect that you're familiar with this video thing that had come out, The Secret.
Yes.
And other people who are talking in terms of things like that, saying that basically it's in the way you perceive things, and you bring to you the negative or the positive, and so however your life ends up. This seems to be, and particularly in this, saying that there are no such things as victims. You know, the only victimization that's caused is created by what you bring upon yourself. I find this in other things, such as science of the mind and things of this nature. These things are really seeming to come into prominence, and I'm wondering what the connection is in terms of white supremacy.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. This is another banner that they're waving to get people to chase after.
Yeah, and it really seems to put the blame squarely on the non-white people.
Absolutely. I agree with Dr. Welsing on this point right here. There is almost enough evidence because of the propaganda against non-white people classified as black to begin to round us up and put us in concentration camps. When you look at the imagery that we have in regards to entertainment. Well, I'll go through all 9 areas: economics, education, entertainment, labor law, politics, religion, sex, and war. When you go through all the 9 areas of activity as far as the propaganda against us, it's pretty hard to make an argument why they shouldn't do it. Someone could just say, don't need these people anymore, do we? What good are they? What do they bring? We can live without Michael Jordan dunking a basketball, can't we? I believe someone could make this argument and almost get it to stick. Let's just round them up and get rid of them. We don't need them. What do they bring? We would have a very difficult time overcoming that. In part to our, unfortunately, because of our victimization and how many of us do behave, unfortunately. We'd have a very hard time overcoming that, but that's one thing I'm in agreement with her on.
Yeah, I think you would have a lot of, or a significant number of non-white people who might even participate in the roundup, who would encourage the roundup and say, yes, that's exactly what we need to do. I feel like I've heard some non-white people saying things very close to that already. Even in the way that we talk about President Obama and other things, I hear non-white people who bing, sound exactly like that. We are total waste. We don't do anything. We're not constructive. They almost sound like the individuals who promote eugenics, the white people who promote eugenics. Yeah, I think you would have a lot of non-white people who would be front and center and ready to go ahead with such a movement. We had one other 111 person who called in with a hand up. 111, are you there? Other 111?
Hello?
Yep, we can hear you.
C.O.W.S, he mentioned The Secret earlier, but I'll let you finish what you were saying because I didn't interrupt you. Were you done what you were saying?
I'm sorry.
No. Gus, were you done with your talk?
Oh yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Just make sure you speak up, speak nice and loud and clear so we can hear you, please. Thank you.
Okay. C.O.W.S mentioned The Secret earlier. In the documentary, I forgot the guy's name, but he's a black scholar, and he basically broke down some of the subliminal messages in there. Like, they had, like, the dark people. They had the dark people, like, in the inferior positions. And one of them, they had the black person in chains, right? And I think he was in chains, and he was behind the jail cell. And then they have this one scene with this white guy. He says, you could, I think he's talking about The Secret and how you could track anything, whether you're in India, you're New York. He mentions all these places, but the one place he didn't mention was Africa, which is so, yeah. Even in her movie The Secret, there's still some underlying, racism in there. Like a lot of the stuff they got from, what is her name? Hicks. I forgot her first name, but she works with the Abraham, right? A lot of the stuff they got it from her, but they exited her out and they just had a whole bunch of them people repeating what she already had said. So, yeah, I just wanted to note that out there. Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
You gotta say something.
I didn't know if you were done yet.
I'm done.
Yeah, I didn't know. Yeah,
done.
I have heard. I'm in Seattle, Washington, and a lot of white people just rave about that film and the book. You gotta check it out. It's the greatest thing, and blah blah blah. And
it makes you feel good, but if you still doing it and, people still mistreating you because of the way your skin color, kind of frustrating that it's that it's not working because these white supremacists are at work against you. So, yeah, I mean, it makes people feel good. Makes people feel really good, but there's some stuff you just can't deny. There's more evidence that it is white supremacy than it is working in the secret work.
Now, is anyone here familiar with Eckhart Tolle?
I am not. No, sir.
Who?
Okay. Eckhart Tolle or Eckhart Tolle? I may be
Oh,
pronouncing
yeah. Didn't he write something about how the money laws or something like that?
No, he has a book called The Power of Now.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, I am. Okay,
Oprah.
yeah.
Oprah loves his book. Now, I don't even believe he mentions racism in his book at all. But she loves that particular book and that particular approach because it supports that it's just all you and your perception. It's just you, it's your perception, it's how you handle things. But racism and white supremacy, this is a group game.
For sure. I wasn't familiar with the author's exact name, but I actually had a white person that I was cool with. We used to run in the foothills of California when I lived in the East Bay area. Everything was cool until I got very focused on racism. She was telling me books left and right about racism. She said her dad was racist. When I got the show started, everything changed. She said, I remember exactly, and it jarred me because I wasn't as confident in my understanding of white supremacy at the time, but she said, you're always talking about this race thing. It's always going to be something. There are always problems, You can't just focus on one problem. I mean, once you finish racism, then it'll be something else. I mean, gosh, you should really get that book, The Power of Now. You should really just read that. That's what it's about, not being focused on how you're mistreated or what problems there are. Just, it's right now. It's right here. What are we going to do with this moment? That's the approach to take. I think you should really read it. And I was really bothered because it was like we were in agreement. We're in a system of racism. There was no argument there. It was basically like you're wasting your time doing all this. And I think that was the last conversation that we had. Never had any further discussion. But she admitted her dad was racist. And it was even that whole approach, a white person telling a non-white person, I think is incredibly powerful and racist because it totally ignores problem solving. If you have a problem, white people demonstrate every day. What you do right now is solve that problem. You do not sit here and ignore the problem and just, we're going to sit back and read books. No. You use logic and you solve that problem. And when the next problem comes up, you solve that problem. That's what white people demonstrate every day, except when it comes to what non-white people should do about racism. Then it's no more problem solving. Now it's pray or, things God will take care of it. It just becomes any abstract thing we can think of except problem solving. We had an extra person called in. 631, are you there? 631?
Yes, hi.
Greetings. How are you doing?
Good, how you doing?
Well as can be expected.
Good. This is V. Stu. I was calling in because I actually heard someone say Eckhart Tolle, and that just rang off bells for me because I actually had a chance to study some of what he had, some of his works. I have been able to look at some of his books and read up on what he was doing. And my take on it is this, because this is where I learned about him through Oprah, of course. He was on Oprah, and Oprah really liked, I think someone said that Oprah was really,
she loves
him. She loves him, yeah, exactly. She loves him. And I think that what's interesting about his teachings is that, for me anyway, is that I actually learned through, even before I started reading Mr. Fuller's book, which was interesting, I learned through his books that the white collective, the people who are considered either suspected white supremacists, white people, white supremacists, that whole entire group was part of what they call a pain body. That's what Eckhart Tolle was talking about. pain
That's
bodies.
right.
Yeah, and so, the first thing that came to my mind when he started talking about it, he said there's even pain bodies that are just a huge dominating force, and I think that was his way of telling us that, we have racism, white supremacy here. I'm not gonna say it in those terms, but this is how I say it. And so that's where I first said, oh, he recognizes that this is a dominating force. Now, like you said, it's all about, okay, well, what are the solutions? What are the solutions? Well, I believe that he was probably, I think out of everyone that I have read about, I think that he was the only person that I found to try to call himself giving us a solution, I guess I should say. But he didn't give it he gave it in a very vague way. So essentially he would say, okay, well, you have this pain body. How do you react to it? Well, you don't react to it through emotion. Sort of like what Mr. Fuller says, right? Hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah, no, there is some benefits to many of the things that Mr. Tolley discusses in his work. I'm not disputing that at all.
Oh no, I'm not disputing you at all. I was just giving you my take on it, because when you mentioned Eckhart Tolle, I said, I have to call in because I did do a lot of reading about him, and I think that he's the one white person that I've read that actually has come close to saying, okay, this is the solution, but he still didn't go very specifically with the solution. He just said that there's a certain way that you have to approach pain bodies, and that's how he was trying to talk. But he really didn't get to the heart of telling us how we can dismantle racism, white supremacy. He didn't really go into specifics. I think he was the closest you can ever get to some white person saying, this is sort of like the direction you need to go in to fight this thing. But he is like the closest that I've ever seen, and I believe me, I've read a lot of books out there, and he's the closest. And even with that, I was very unsatisfied with. And thank God I got all my books from the library, because I'm not paying for no solutions. If I'm going to pay for a book, I want solutions in it. So I definitely agree with what everybody was saying today. We need to start concentrating on solutions. We know that these white people are not going to think about doing solutions, so we need to kind of move forward and look for those solutions. And if we could find a way to get them to slip up when they talk, that's probably the best way to do it.
And I also want to, before we leave, I just want to say this, because I saw it on television the other day. They know how to fix this problem. Don't think they don't know right now how to solve the food crisis all over this planet, the water crisis all over this planet, and how to make this place a so-called heaven, this entire planet. They know how to do it. They've chosen not to. Proof of that is they'll take any species on this planet that's on the verge of extinction, and what will they do? They will create a habitat where that particular species can flourish and prosper. They do it all the time. So they know how to fix our problems.
They did it for the Japanese, right?
That is
right after they bombed them, didn't they do that?
That is correct. Because non-white people think that they don't have the so-called, solution pill or whatever to fix these problems, that they can't just fix it. Many of non-white people I've spoken to believe that, no, no, we'll always have this. I'm going, no. They know how to do it. They do it all the time with animals.
I agree.
And I agree with you, ma'am. They did it with the Japanese.
I hope it has been a constructive program. Thanking everybody for calling in. I did want to ask, though, because I had said it before, Mr. Nero, you suggested Dr. Robert Williams' book and having him on the program. He was with us a couple of weeks ago. Have you been able to catch that program?
I did.
Oh, okay.
I downloaded the archive.
Oh, okay. Groovy. Did you think he had constructive things to say on the program?
He had some constructive things, but for me, what I learned and continue to learn is just how confused many non-white people are.
What specifically, I guess, stood out as confusion on that program?
If my memory. Yeah, I'm trying to recall some of the things that he mentioned.
Oh, wait. I learned I have picked up a skill along the way. Just hang tight. Check this. I have picked up a skill along the way. Okay. Are you a white person?
No, I'm not white.
Okay. When I say non-white, I just mean an individual who is classified as not white. So would it be inaccurate to say that Dr. Robert Williams is a non-white male?
No, that would not be accurate for me.
Oh, okay. But even
Dr.
if
Robert Williams is an Afro-American or a black man?
It would be inaccurate to say that Dr. Robert L. Williams is not a white male. That would be an inaccurate statement?
Yes.
I cannot believe this. That I was going to give a live demonstration of the confusion that I felt was on the program, the statement that he made right there. And Blog Talk Radio killed my switchboard. I was muting people so that I could get a quiet sampling from that program since I had it uploaded, and they killed my switchboard. So now I can't put everybody back on so they can talk. Man, I suspect that was well timed because I just needed like 30 seconds to get everybody back on, and I don't have it, so now I can't put everybody back online. Oh well. I will do better next time and leave everybody on, so that won't be a problem because I could have got live feedback to what he said. I thought that was confusing. At any rate, my apologies. They got me again with the switchboard thing. I'm at least glad I did get to play everybody's commercials before wrapping up the program. 631, Mr. Nero, Mr. 720, Miss Lauren, Ashley Lauren. Thank everybody for calling in for the program. I hope it was constructive. We'll have 4 shots next week to call in. You can share your information. Thursday, Matt Ray, he's a white person. Friday, Dr. Welsing makes her second trip to the cows. Saturday, William Pepper, he is a white man. And Sunday, Charles Mills, the racial contract. That's 1, 2, 3, 4 for next week, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And as a result, BTR, I agree. They are. I suspect they are hating a little bit. As a result of the program with Dr. Williams, the decision that I made, in addition to now closing the chat room for the first hour of the program, I'm doing a 1 non-white person quota per month. So I'm still cool with people making suggestions for people that they think should come on the program, but I'm only doing 1 non-white person per month. And I already have a non-white person for January and a non-white person for February. So if you have a non-white person that you'd like to come on the show, very likely that they won't be here until March. The only people that I'm exempting from that list, Dr. Welsing, Mr. Fuller, Vernelia Randall, a few other folks. But other than that, 1 non-white person per month. That is the new non-white quota for the cows. Because as Mr. Nero said, non-white people are very confused, and I'm tired of wading through confusion with non-white people on the show. I feel like I have to hold my punches, and I can't really question things that they're saying. I'm trying to avoid conflict, so in order to not have to deal with that, I'm not going to have that many non-white people on the show. Going back to exactly what I said at the beginning, I would much rather talk to white people. So we'll have a white person very next show. Matt Ray, his book Not Quite White, Thursday. Should be 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. He sent me a different time, so I'll double check. Just check back if the time changes. Just check back. At any rate, please support Back of the Bus's blog, nonwhitealliance.wordpress.com. One more time, it's nonwhitealliance.wordpress.com. Justice's email, justice.asap@yahoo.com. My blog, racism-notes.blogspot.com. One more time, it's racism-notes.blogspot.com. Thank you, everybody, for calling in. 631 has the coolest voice in the world. Thank you for calling in. We'll be back on Thursday. Context of white supremacy. Replace white supremacy with justice immediately. We'll be back. Thank you.